Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Alicia Sutherland, President of IABC Queensland, and I'll be your host for our special event tonight. Firstly, a little bit about IABC. The International Association of Business Communicators has more than 10,000 members globally, and IABC Queensland is a rapidly growing chapter in this network. We connect communication and related industry professionals to the latest and most relevant content and ideas in the marketplace via both traditional and digital channels. In doing so, we aim to create connection, develop strategic communicators, and advance the profession. We thought it was time to talk a little deeper about the issues that matter. So tonight, we're bringing you the first in our brand new panel series, Candid Conversations, Comms Disrupted, 2020 Insights and Future Directions. And it's great to have you with us. It's been one roller coaster of a year, and in tonight's panel, we've brought together 4 communication leaders to share what they've learnt in 2020, how they're navigating the impacts, and what they see as next on the horizon. I'm delighted to introduce our panel for this evening. Sinead Hourigan is the Queensland Managing Director for Robert Walters. Prior to this, Sinead worked for several large multinationals and held executive positions within the Irish government. Sinead has served as a former president of the Recruitment Consulting Staffing Association across Australia and New Zealand, and as a committee member for economic development in Australia. I'd really like to welcome Sinead to our panel tonight. On behalf of IABC Queensland, we would like to thank Sinead and her team at Robert Walters for being the sponsors of tonight's event. Robert Walters will be offering free consultations to all prospective job seekers in our audience tonight, looking for resume or career positioning advice. And of course, the team is always available to discuss any of your recruitment needs. So contact Robert Walters if you'd like to find out more. Our second panellist for this evening is Corey Heathwood, Head of Government, Industry and Public Affairs for Brisbane Airport Corporation. Corey is responsible for Brisbane Airport projects and operations. Corey is currently on the board of the major Brisbane festivals and is a founding director of BNE Enterprise, an organisation that connects and promotes businesses on and around the airport precinct. Thank you for joining us tonight, Corey. I'd next like to introduce Sarah Ramsey, Associate Director in Kpmg's Corporate Affairs Advisory Team. Sarah works with clients on major projects across Australia. She is responsible for managing complex public issues and has worked as a political advisor at state and federal government level, as well as in government relations within the private sector. I'd also like to welcome Sarah to our panel this evening. And our fourth and final panellist tonight is Dr. Anne Lane, Senior Lecturer and Researcher at the Queensland University of Technology. Anne teaches undergraduate and postgraduate levels in the School of Advertising, Marketing and Public Relations for QUT Business School, predominantly teaching PR theory, community consultation and engagement. Anne holds a Doctor of Philosophy and has had various papers published in national and international journals. And I'd also like to welcome Anne to the panel this evening. So we have a number of questions to go through tonight in our discussion, and we would like to extend an invitation to our audience tonight to post any questions you would like answered as we go along. Then we've allocated some time at the end for our audience Q&A, where we can put your questions directly to the panel. So please ask away. This event is being recorded and we'll be distributing the link afterwards to all of our audience tonight. So please sit tight, relax and enjoy as we get underway with our candid conversation. And to start off the panel this evening, I'd like to ask this question. In the year of the pandemic, 2020 has certainly thrown everything at us, both personally and professionally. I'd now like to hear from each of the panellists. What have you learned as a leader?
That is absolutely sure. If there's one thing that 2020 has shown us, is that you cannot tell what is around the corner. But I think what I have learned is there's a new appreciation, I think, as a result of COVID-19. I'm sure there'll be a COVID-20 before long. That has appreciation for the type of leadership that I've always espoused. See, when I am in a leadership position, I like to do it consultatively. I like to do it in a caring and nurturing fashion. I'm not one of these people that likes to go like over the top into battle. I'm much more about leading from within and encouraging others and supporting them to achieve excellence. I think in the time of COVID, what we've seen is that's actually become quite an appreciated leadership skill. So I don't know what anybody else has had any experience like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I've been talking for a little while about empathetic leadership, and for anyone who's had the opportunity to hear Julia Gillard speak on this very topic, she talks a lot about it, and it's one of the most critical traits that I think we've seen emerge. Certainly I started 2020 thinking that, you know, decisiveness and control were really important leadership traits, and you know, about halfway through March, I figured out that decisiveness could only last for about 10 minutes at a time. And we just had to consistently move and change directions to try and manage our way through. And control wasn't even on the radar at that point. So we really just had to learn how to be fluid. But I think that empathetic leadership and also the capacity to show your team that you are vulnerable. I think the capacity to show that you make mistakes. I shared with my team a few months ago when we all got back together, which we were very lucky to be able to do. Some of the things that I had done wrong at the beginning, some of the mistakes I'd made, and just to let them know that we all do it. There's things that all of us could have done better along the way, and that's okay because it's the first time we've been through this. So it just gives them the confidence to own up, make mistakes and just move on.
So I really love, I love those points. And Sinead, in terms of that empathetic leadership sort of line, what do you think was preventing us about perhaps doing that a little more before COVID that's brought that out through the pandemic experience?
That's a big question. I think plenty of things. I think that we still live in a society where there is an element of, you know, weakness associated with feelings, and you know, people always think that you need to be strong as a leader, and strength has a tendency to lean more towards assertion rather than, you know, as you said, consultative behaviours and all the rest. So I think it's just everyone figuring out. It's like I said to someone the other day, we welcomed work into our homes this year, right? Whether we wanted to or not, work became a housemate. And if you're going to have work in your house, then you have to learn to live with it in a very different way. So it has to become more accepting. It has to become kinder, because I'm not going to have a home where they're not the behaviours and the values that are demonstrated. So I think it's just flipped our world on its head, which hasn't been a bad thing.
You know, I know from Brisbane Airport's point of view, you know, we talk about the 4 C's, if we'll put it that way: care, courage, collaboration and communication. And that really held us in good stead for this period when we were, you know, working from home for a period of time. And certainly with when you've been talking about leadership and working with a team, you know, I've got a fantastic team that I work with, but they're all different ages, and you know, they were doing it tough as well. So as a leader, not only did you have to actually, you know, you give purpose so they actually, you know, had something to work on for an outcome, but also understand them from a personal perspective as well, because they were doing tough from times as well, and just being there and being that listener as well for them, I think was just equally as, you know, as important.
I'd like to add another C to your 4 C's, Corey, and put connectivity there, because I think during COVID that was something that was well and truly lost. Yes, we had all the technology in the world, we had the Zoom, the Teams, everything was coming up to speed. It was really easy to connect, but you didn't connect in that meaningful way that you did in the past. There weren't those kitchen conversations. There wasn't that peer-to-peer learning that just happened organically because we're in the office together. And certainly as a consultant, what I found really difficult during COVID was actually business development. There's so much rapport that you can build face to face. And without that rapport, it's actually a lot harder to win the work. We were always set up well to do the work, but it's been a lot harder to continue to build our networks and then build on the work that we were doing. And certainly my COVID experience was unlike anyone else's. I actually went to work every day. I was on secondment with the Queensland government for over 6 months. So I was like, what COVID? But you kind of forget the importance of that connectivity. Like I had it all the time. I had a team up there. It was a different team to usual, but I had those people. A lot of people didn't have anyone. So being able to connect with people more regularly, I think really came through during COVID. And I think that's one of the great things that hopefully can stay.
Can I bounce on something you said earlier, Sinead? We were talking about why weren't these skills appreciated previously? Why have they come to the fore now? I think a lot of it's to do with how we position them, because they tend to be referred to quite dismissively sometimes as soft skills. And we hear them referred to with this, which is a term that has, I think, a lot of negative baggage associated with it. These are not soft skills. They are skills that are important, because soft implies, like you were saying, weakness and emotion. And I'm just going to chuck it out there, femininity. These are often perceived as being, female type skills. And I think what we've learned from COVID is these are not female skills. They're not male skills. They're just damn good skills that we've really come to be appreciative of.
We like to say they're the hard
skills. The other day as power skills.
Power skills. So we call them the hard skills because we like to overcome the soft dynamics too.
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And just back to your point about collaboration and connectivity, I spoke to someone the other day who runs a business in New Zealand, and he was saying to me that he's had to flip his thinking entirely, because his view was you could do professional work from home easily, but the type of work that was operational in nature, be it like payroll or things really needed to be done in an office environment because of the systems and infrastructure required. And they figured out really quickly through this whole experience that in fact, once you get the infrastructure right, those types of skills can be done really easily from home, but it's the knowledge skills that you lose, because you lose collaboration, you lose innovation if you can't spend time together having incidental conversations at the other seat, the water cooler. So we can just keep adding them.
And just to pick up on a point Corey made as well about those listening skills, I think that we've all been almost forced, I suppose, through this experience to try and become better listeners. It's not around the water cooler, as also Sarah said. So, Corey, would you say over the 2020 period, has there been anything else as a leader that sort of really changed for you?
I think being, adaptability, I think, is really, really important in this sort of circumstance, and certainly from a communications point of view, being the topic of tonight, is actually understanding what the problems might well be, and then actually being bold enough to actually come up with solutions, because people were open to hear from you and to drive them forward, and encouraging your team to actually coming up with solutions. It might not be even different options is better than nothing, and that it gave them, as I said, a bit of purpose as well, that they can actually grab hold onto a project and move it forward.
I think if there's one good thing we've got from Zoom, it's that we have to sit and listen sometimes, and we can't all talk at the same time. So it's kind of been enforced on us in some ways.
Sorry, Anne, you're on mute.
I was just going to add to that. I think the other thing that we've learned from Zoom is you have to control your facial expressions a lot better than you do when you're on the phone. So that's been a great learning for everybody involved, I think, too.
Actually, I got a really
And what's
great,
going on in your background as well.
Yes.
and there's a great tip from a pretty expert facilitator I was speaking with the other day, actually, who was saying that she actually strategically positions her coffee cup so that she can't see herself all day when she's facilitating, so she's not looking at that, which I thought was quite a nifty trick.
There you go. Things you learn, hey?
Well, over 2020, obviously comms has definitely been disrupted. So how have each of your organisations, or organisations that you've worked with, responded to the challenges of this year, and how do you think this will impact communication professionals in both the short and the longer term?
Can I just start by putting out a plea? Please, can nobody use the words pivot, agile, nimble, flip? I think I heard that a minute ago. Can because I think, you know, those words are just, they should be banned completely at the moment. I would love to have some kind of a swear jar here that we could each of us put $1 into, so that every time that we use
I'm going to be handing you over some cultivated cash later.
Right.
There'll be no pivoting on this panel, Sinead.
No, I don't. I'll stay away from the P word. I'll do that for you. But look, I can talk about my organisation, obviously being Robert Walters. We are a people organisation, and Sarah said we spend our lives connecting with people face to face. So for us, transitioning to a world where we couldn't connect with our candidates, connect with our clients, that level of just, you know, personal interaction was pretty challenging. But our comms team did the most extraordinary job, and we did transition our entire world into a digital and virtual environment so quickly. And the benefits have been incredible. I was telling you the other day, Alicia, we had an event the other day that reached 800 people from
Amazing.
Singapore to New York to Dubai to London and the ANZ region, all just dialing in from wherever they were to hear the topic of conversation because they just wanted to know, which there's no way we would ever have been able to reach that audience in the past, and not at the price, right? So there's something really positive about that from a cost perspective, but as well as that global reach that you can definitely get. So I'm not saying I don't want to go back to catching up with people for coffees, because I kind of like that, but I think the balance of both has been quite extraordinary. And our comms team have become what I would classify as essential services. And I think, so having done, you know, the amount of months you did in government, understanding who's an essential service, this is a great way for comms people to become that.
Fantastic insight. Yeah, Corey.
I was going to say, well, clearly it's been quite an extraordinary year for you know, Brisbane Airport, and right in the middle of the pandemic, as many would know, we were opening up a new runway. So what we had this for a long period of time. The team was working on some amazing plans in terms of community festivals. There was going to be a fun run. There was going to be a dinner along the runway. All those sort of things, which of course got canned, and even to right up to the moment, we didn't know, you know, how many people were there. The weather was coming in. We had all these provisions, but you know, it all got. You know, we were able to actually open it on the day. But I'm just so proud of being part of that team who delivered under those sort of circumstances. And it was just a fantastic outcome to actually achieve that from a communications point of view.
Yeah.
Like Corey, I'd say I was really proud to work for Kpmg during COVID, because they certainly made some really tough decisions right at the start. 200 redundancies, all staff took a 20% pay cut voluntarily. Partners took a 35% pay cut. Now that came hard to a whole lot of people, but what they did was they communicated regularly. They were really transparent about the financial figures. They said to us, look, if we do better than we expect, we will return that money, and they did. So we did get some of that money back, and they said our priority is getting everyone back to full pay, which they did after the 4 months. So they made some hard decisions, but they made them early. They didn't make anything further, and they did what they said, which I think went a long way. Looking more broadly across corporate Australia, because we of course work with clients as well, I think you've kind of seen some stark contrast between corporate Australia. You've seen those that have done really well, like Coles and Woolworths. They probably hired some of your workers, Corey, from the airports to go and pack shelves, or BHP. They gave a whole heap of money back to their local community. But then you've seen others that on the one hand, they were taking JobKeeper, but they were paying massive executive bonuses or lifting the share price. So I think you've seen two completely opposite ends of the spectrum across corporate Australia. But what I hope from COVID is that, you know, some organisations have actually realised it's okay to be purpose driven, and that through that purpose you can actually also be profitable, and it doesn't have to be a trade-off one or the other. And I think for comms professionals, that can be really comforting to know that, you know, there is a seat at the table now. People do need you if you're going to, I'm going to say adapt or change or do something different than you otherwise would. You need comms people to be able to tell that story, and in a purposeful way. So yeah, I think there's a bright future for comms people.
Yeah, I love that. I've certainly found through my dealings through IABC and obviously my work that comms most definitely has a seat at the table if it didn't in previous years, and that definitely crisis management and reputation management has really come to the fore as something that organisations really do need to be looking at and having a plan around for the future after this experience.
And while we're all talking about how everybody's done so very well, I would just like to toot QUT's trumpet. In common with a lot of tertiary education providers, we didn't just pivot, we swiveled with grace, and not just
So
once.
you just used the P word.
I wasn't saying not to use it. But we did. We've been talking about putting a lot of our offerings online for years, and we've been planning that it would take years to make that happen. But no, it took us 2 weeks, and we've delivered experiences to our students that they were very satisfied with. And then we've replicated that and continued that in semester 2. And we did all that with no resourcing, with very little notice, and with a great deal of aplomb and skill. Having said that, it was interesting to me as an observer, this is my personal observation, how ironic it was that as an institution that has some of the thought leaders and the major research brains that look at things like organizational change and crisis management and that sort of thing, that we didn't actually get called on to offer advice to our own institution. But they did okay. You know, I'd probably give them a B.
They could have done better with you.
Could have done better with me, yes.
So there does seem to be a bit of an overriding theme coming through each of you tonight around that. We never sort of knew that we could rise to the challenge perhaps as quickly and as well as really what you did. Is that sort of how you felt? I mean, certainly with you, Corey, with the second runway launch and obviously having your plans quite curtailed for that.
Yeah, there's a few different sort of phrases and words that you can stick up on screens and bits and pieces. But I was at heard a message during this period about never give up, and built a whole speech about that, and that really drove me because there was a whole range of different challenges, and with things such as clearly with no international traffic, our team in our commercial area with over a couple of weeks developed the whole B&E marketplace to help our retailers be able to sell goods online. So that to me was a fantastic area. And then from a communications point of view, how can we get that out to as many networks as coming from? So clearly from my role being looking after the industry and the political area, I made sure all our local members were aware of our industry bodies, and then clearly our community network as well. So it was when you're able to get something like that, how can we actually help and drive it through our own networks to make the most of those sort of opportunities as they come?
And I think it's really important to reflect on that. And I said it to someone the other day, I was talking about the things that will make you stand out as a candidate, right, in the next 12, 24 months or whatever it is. And I said, take time now, write down the amazing things you did this year on your resume, because you're going to forget, because people have done incredible things. And, while we're all talking about our amazing organizations, it would be remiss of me not to talk about Robert Walters, but we transitioned thousands of workers in hundreds of different environments remotely within 2 weeks. Like every single one. And we had probably about 700 or 800 different employers we had to deal with to try and get these workers home. OH&S visits remotely by our amazing OH&S team to make sure we were sending workers home to safe environments, and then the communication strategy. And then in the midst of all that, trying to figure out, well, what happens if there's an outbreak? What do we do with our workers who are out working with clients? What do we do for them? Just incredible work being done in areas that we never even had to consider before. So, and I said it actually to one of our own team recently. I was like, write it down and remember it, because it's very easy to slip back into the routine of hopefully a fairly normal time and not remember these things and not be able to reflect on them and go, I did that. And we have a right to feel proud about that, I think.
I think that's some fantastic advice there, Sinead, and from the panel. And it's great that we can take so many silver linings, I think, and positives from what, at least for the first while, was quite a stressful and somewhat scary experience all around, with a lot of uncertainty. But speaking of uncertainty, there obviously is a reasonable amount of uncertainty facing us in our businesses and in our general operating environments. So from your interactions and experience, what are the greatest communication challenges that are going to be faced by business and industry moving forward? Now, Sinead.
I'm happy to. This is a bit of a personal obsession of mine. I think it's all about data. I think that is the biggest challenge faced by business and industry, and also individuals, I think, but just the ability to sift through data to get to the things that are important, to synthesize that information and to make it useful. I just feel like businesses have become better and better at gathering information, but the capacity to actually segment it and do something useful with it is still a huge challenge. So I think any comms professionals who are really good at understanding how to create data sets, how to synthesize those data sets, and how to create that narrative that comes after that to allow better business planning and better outcomes, it's going to be an amazing achievement, great opportunity for people.
I just want to bolt on there as well. I think it would be good to be not only great analyzers of data, but also to be critical thinkers, to be able to look at facts and be able to check them and be able to go yes, no, maybe, and bring that sort of higher level thinking, because that's sometimes it's something we're not always associated with. It's okay, you're the comms person, write me a media release, and that's great, and it's part of what we do. But there's also that much more strategic level at which we work, and I think that will be something going forward. We have demonstrated in spades during COVID, and it would be a shame to take back from that. So for me, the challenge is going to be to keep the ground that we've made up and to not let go of that, because we fought hard for it, we deserve it. So let's just maintain the idea that, yes, we can write you a beautiful media release, but look what else we did and can continue to do.
So it's maintaining that seat at the table.
Yeah.
Into the future.
Definitely so, yeah.
Interesting. Challenges for business and industry. Corey.
Oh, look, I think certainly from both from an internal communications and an external communications, even to pick up a theme there, being transparent and how transparency and where is that line as well, because whether you're working for home and working with the team, they want to know what's happening in the business now with the uncertainty, which they did. So you need to be transparent with them to your best of your abilities at all times. So, and I think that's an important part even now where we've been back at the workplace certainly from June as well. But as we move forward and dealing with the challenges that we're dealing with on a daily basis, you've got to be transparent across the business so people can come along with you for the ride. So no one likes any surprises, so therefore you want to do that. And some of the work from our CEO with their regular teleconferencing to our team meetings and everything else that goes through that, and communications you go through. I just think that's been vitally important. And also from an external communications point of view, there is interest from that it is safe to travel. Getting that message out there. Working with our community work, and we've been out there at community now and talking about what's going on at Brisbane Airport. So people, you just can't assume people know everything, and both from an internal and external. Yep. And you can't, as a communicator, got to continue to push that very strongly like that.
Some great points, Sarah.
Oh, I just add to that, and I'm somewhat surprised it kind of hasn't come up already, is like digital communications. So I just think with COVID, everything is now online. You've got all businesses have had to change or adapt in some way. You've got rum distilleries now using, making hand sanitizer. You've got fine dining restaurants. They've gone to takeaway. Like everything has changed, and everything is no longer in hard copy form. And I know we were talking about this the other day, Alicia, and you might have a different view, but I just think digital is probably going to be the way of the future. Like my mum now can order a meal using a QR code. That would never have happened if COVID hadn't happened. My in-laws order their groceries online. Again, that would never have happened if COVID hadn't happened. So I think, understanding what digital communications channels are out there, whether it's a social media type tool or whether it's something else, understanding what's available, and then of course being able to utilize that and get the maximum coverage. Because like you were saying before, Sinead, like it's a great opportunity to connect with hundreds of people all over the globe now, and we can only do that because of digital connectivity. So I think that's probably in the future.
No, I'd have to say I 100% agree with you, Sarah. I think it's interesting when you say, should we have a meeting? And then it's the debate over which platform you're going to use. Is it going to be WebEx or Teams, or is it going to be Zoom, or what is it going to be? So no, I think that we've all been schooled certainly in those platforms and tools very quickly.
I think a big challenge, certainly for us in the tertiary education sector, but I suspect for other service providers as well, is that everything is still very fluid. And it changes so frequently, and not everybody wants the same thing. So while completely taking on board, Sarah, what you were saying about the digital stuff, I deal with students who say, I need to be on campus. I need to have face-to-face classes. I do, and these are people of the generation that you would expect would be eating digital with a knife and fork. they don't want that for their experience. They want to be able to meet someone for coffee like we're talking about and have a bit of a chat and to do that, the extra stuff that makes the learning happen. And so for us, we're trying to be all things to all people, and that is a huge challenge because you're certainly not going to be resourced to do everything for one or two people. It's going to be definitely go along with the majority. And I do think that's going to have some challenges for us about how we achieve customer satisfaction when you're not able to deal with their very expressed needs.
Yeah.
There is no one customer anymore.
No.
There's
No.
too many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. All right, well, moving on, thinking about individual communications professionals now and their need that we've discussed to adapt in this marketplace. So what do you see as the top skills that communicators should develop in their personal capability stacks in order to future ready their careers? I'll start with Sarah this time.
Yeah, sure. So I know the question was about communications, but I want to answer it kind of in two parts and in a different sense. I actually think communications can be a bit of an easier task, but what typically tends to be a lot more difficult is engagement and having those networks. We were speaking about Julia Gillard earlier. I recently read her book, Women in Leadership, and she laments that one of the things that she wishes she had done earlier in her career was establish those networks, go to more of those events so she could build her network, and then she thought she might have had an easier time as PM. So, you know, events like tonight, it's such a shame that it's just the four of us and some camera crew in the room, but being able to do these kind of things face to face, you know, that's a great opportunity of building your networks and finding those opportunities to connect with like-minded people. The other part, I think, in terms of comms, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, Anne, as well, is we're in this 24/7 media cycle, and it's so easy to be thrown a media release or churn out some content. But I think we have such a specialised craft, and I always hear people say, oh, anyone can write comms, and that gets on my wick no end. But I think there's more that we can be doing to really show our worth. You know, part of that is around storytelling. People really connect with stories or personal anecdotes, not just the facts and figures that people are used to trotting out all the time. And also something that we've been focused on at Kpmg is better leveraging behavioural science or economics as a way to get those outcomes, measure those outcomes, and then report that up. I think that also gives us that better seat at the table because we're able to demonstrate with hard evidence, which is sometimes difficult in communications, that what we've done has been successful. So I think there's a bit more we can do to really hone our craft and let people know how we're honing it.
Yeah, some great points there, Sarah. Just Sinead, in terms of dealing with,
I'm going to use
obviously
an A word
Oh, no.
here.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Holding on.
Look, I think I've already referenced a few of the skills that I think, and I don't speak just about communications professionals because I think most of the skills in any line of work that we have are actually very similar. And there'll be specific, you know, technical competencies that sit within particular disciplines and verticals, but by and large, most of what we do, we all need to do, and when we do it better, we do better. I do think, and I'll go back to the data piece again, and that goes back to your point completely, Sarah, about being able to prove your worth, and it's the best way of doing it. I'm all about data-driven decision making. So when people come to me and they can give me evidential data to say this is why we should do this, I'm all over it. But if people give me anecdotal feedback and I think and I feel and I'm like, I need more. So I think it's really important that we start to really utilize those sorts of things and making sure that we do keep that seat at the table, because that's pretty important. I also think that we need to become very technology savvy. And I don't think there's room in businesses anymore for people who take time to adapt to new platforms and need a lot of support, because businesses are running leaner than they ever have, and they have to. And that's the future for, be it 12, 24, who knows how many months. They don't have the energy. So they really need people who can get on board and can change and be agile, because that's what it will take. I know, but it does.
Yeah.
It takes people who have the capacity to shift quickly and take things on board and run with it. And this goes back to, and I don't know if you love or hate this word, but we'll see. Resilience is another one for me, I know. But honestly, this year has taught people that. And I'm talking about it in the context of, as an employer, meeting candidates in the market and going, demonstrate that to me and demonstrate how you stood up in 2020, how you got through something and what you did on the other side, because that's the key. Because we're not, it's not over, and the market's going to be fractious for a little while longer, I would say. So those people who can stand up and get up every morning, shake it off, you know, in your comment about, you know, getting through it, you know, that it's the key.
Yeah, and given the range of industries and professionals that you're dealing with, that sounds like some great advice there. So Anne, I know you're not a fan of the terms agility and resilience. But something tells me you're pretty agile, Anne.
Oh, yeah.
So in terms of what are you pushing towards with your students?
Okay, well, first of all, can I commend you on not saying future-proof your career? Because you can't. And again, that's another learning from the COVID pandemic. You cannot future-proof yourself at all, because something will come along that nobody expected, tip the world on its head. What you can be, and you said it, is future-ready. So what are we doing to be future-ready? Well, we're trying to teach our students in particular the much maligned transferable skills. The problem, of course, and the challenge for us is we don't know the skills that we're going to need. We don't know the technologies that are going to be available in the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So how can we meaningfully prepare students for a world that doesn't yet exist? So to pick up on Sarah's point, what we try to do is tell them things like, for example, storytelling. We've got a new unit coming in on that, because it is, if you can learn the value of storytelling and how to use that strategically in a business context, then whatever new technological development comes along, you can use that, you can adapt that to the telling, the relaying, and the really imagining of the story. So we can't perhaps be as specific about the platforms, but we can be specific about what you do with them and how you use them and the strategic purposes you're using them for.
And can we add in one more thing?
Sure.
From a skills perspective, curiosity. I say it all the time, and you were talking earlier about critical thinking. I think if you can demonstrate that passion and that want and that intent for constant learning, that's a really big differentiator. And people can see it. And you know it when you meet people who have a real want for learning. And that's what employers want, because that's what gets you past the, I can't teach you what we don't know.
Yeah.
Because if you are open to constantly learning new things, then you're halfway there.
But if we're going to chuck in characteristics, I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier, empathy. If we could in some way teach people to have empathy, to be empathetic, if that's even possible, so that they could understand what it's like for the receivers of our communication to get what we're telling them and how they feel and how it helps them and does it fill their needs, that would be a fantastic attribute for anybody to go out into industry with.
We were talking about skills as well into this sort of area, and my thinking certainly evolved over the years, because I come from a consultancy background, and when you're young and being a consultant, you can do everything sort of stuff, and whether it's a communication strategy or a campaign or consultation exercise, not a problem, got it sorted sort of stuff.
You want a job?
Yeah. But I think the where I'm certainly now at is that if you've got a particular skill set, owned. And that really holds you in great stead. And I've been very, very lucky in my career, and with being able to have a wonderful group of friends and a network where somehow I've got this sort of reputation. I know a few people in government and with industry, and then even during this period of time when people weren't at work, but I seem to have a black book full of mobile phone numbers, which came very, very handy at the right time. So it's you can be lucky to actually have a particular area and to do so. And another example of that was very early on in my time at Brisbane Airport, we established an industry organisation. So I come from a background in industry bodies called B&E Enterprise, and that was set up at the time to build business and work for the business community at Brisbane Airport. So during the last period of time, that became a great area, just like we're doing tonight, where we ran a number of industry seminars online to keep companies and businesses involved with what was going on an airport. And we held our first function back, if I'm going to put it that way, at the Brisbane Airport Conference Centre a few weeks ago. Total sellout, and it was just wonderful to actually be able to reach out and bring people back to have a function like that. But there was that sense of that we're able to keep that communication going through that period of time and give people something to look forward to as well.
What a great story, and storytelling in action just right there from Corey about exactly the B&E enterprise and what you've done with that over the past few months particularly. And it's just that constant reference back to connection. And it seems to be the consistent theme we're finding coming through tonight, as well as in terms of those personal capability stacks. I know Sinead and Anne, you were talking about obviously agility and resilience. And Corey, it was interesting too that you've been touching on having your specialisation and your niche and really working out what that is and going for it. But in a far sense, in terms of an interview and application, how do you communicate those things? How can people get those skills and those capabilities across quickly and effectively?
Tell them a story like Corey just did. Tell them on this day I did this thing and this was the result. But flesh it out, make it a story, use the device. And it's because it's your experience, you're the expert, it resonates and people really do listen and pay attention, as Kpmg have already picked up on. They're using that too.
And it's interesting that you mentioned it, because one of the things we have started using a lot more effectively, and again, adversity is the mother of invention, right? So we've known that we have had access to video-based interviewing forever, last few years, and it's been used intermittently and people love it when they use it, but this year it got a lot of use. And this year we are really encouraging our candidates because they can't connect. They can't meet with our clients in the manner in which they used to be able to. So they all do video interviews and present themselves, and they have a great opportunity to give that story and that, reaching out through the screen to say, hello, this is who I am. And it just gives people that sense of, actually, I do want to meet you, because you're not going to meet people in this environment unless you really, really want to. So it's been an amazing tool. And it's interesting because I don't always believe that technology brings people physically closer together, but in this instance, it really does. So it's kind of the converse of what you might think.
I think you hit a great point, Alicia. It's so hard to get across everything that you want to get across in an interview. Not only do you have limited pages of CVs, you've got limited time in front of people. But one thing that I guess I look for, and this is probably because we're pretty focused on it at Kpmg from a leadership capability and capacity building sense, is about defining your professional purpose. And I think if you're purpose driven, it's like the point I was making before with corporates, if you're purpose driven, you can find a way to communicate that. You can live your values and people can see that. I don't know how you feel about this A word, but authenticity is a word.
That's good.
That's okay.
Be careful around here, don't you?
Everyone says authentic, and I think it's kind of comes off as a bit of a gimmick sometimes, but it's living your values, knowing what you stand for, and if you're able to communicate that across the table, I think that just shows through in volumes. And if you can be authentic, then I think that's
Great
comes
point.
across.
Yeah, I like that.
And look, there are green shoots of growth now appearing across business and the economy. So across which industries do each of you anticipate seeing the greatest growth, or perhaps the strongest recovery? So I might start with Corey on this one.
Oh, yeah, it's a very a tough question, because we're waiting to see. I would be clearly in terms of. I still think there's huge growth coming in the health sector and that research area. I think you'll see some efforts there. And I was in a conversation today, and there's certainly a lot of expenditure coming in the defence side of things as well. There's a lot of defence-related work happening up and down the coast at the moment. So there's just two industries I can see some growth into the future anyway, the immediate future anyway.
It's interesting because I was pretty fortunate, as I said at the start, to be up with the Queensland Government on their economic response and working for the task force. And actually at the end of the engagement, we did look at industry attraction and investment opportunities and where those sectors might be, where the growth is. So I wouldn't say I have any real specialist knowledge in this area, but something that kept coming up was around focusing on those traditional strengths and sectors that actually fared reasonably well through COVID. So things like agriculture and resources, and then leveraging those adjacent capabilities, so through technology and the like.
Yeah.
So I think from a sectoral sense, I think you can expect Australia to probably double down on what they've traditionally been good at and continue to focus there. But then looking globally, obviously there's been such a disruption to global supply chains. I think you're going to start to see a lot more local supply chains, which might lead to more local manufacturing, which would be a great thing. We've seen lots of comms campaigns around buying local. And so I think, you know, more and more people are wanting to support small business. There's been lots of campaigns around that. So I think you're going to start to see a lot more local investment. And then what I hope you might see is, you know, Australia has been such a great example of responding to the health crisis. We've done so well in terms of managing, you know, deaths or the health response. And I think that is definitely marketable. It's something that we can market to the rest of the globe, get more visitors when the borders open. We were talking about that earlier. But get more visitors, attract more industries. This is a safe place. It's a reliable place to do business that has to be worth something in a post-COVID world. And I think it's ours for the taking.
Oh, and I think that news is out there. You know, I'm from Ireland, and I get calls all the time from people at home just talking about how have you done it? How's Australia doing so well? So it's resonating already. So the next step is, you know, to get the planes in the air again so that we can get the benefit of it. And I think the other one from my perspective that is, again, it's got to be government led, right? You know, we know that for a mammoth task like this, you need all levels of government engaged to try and rebuild our economy. And you know, we've talked about the infrastructure-led recovery for a while, and I genuinely believe that. And I think now we're seeing a really deep dive into what sensible infrastructure looks like, and you know, the connectivity that you need between it, and whether that's health or roads or railway or whatever it is, making sure that there's a reason and there's a purpose behind it, as opposed to we're just going to spend some money because that's going to help the economy, it's going to help employment. There's a lot more deep thinking, I think, happening now about the type of infrastructure that's actually going to change Australia. And, you know, whether it's digital infrastructure and, you know, cables and subsea and all of that work that's happening, that's the stuff that's going to really make us stand out.
Definitely. Well, I think, well, rather than give you the types of jobs I think are going to do well, I think it's probably useful to delineate some of the stuff that didn't do well and has probably, maybe even hopefully, disappeared from the employment landscape. I know we were moving towards a very casualised employment sector, and lots of people were talking about the gig economy as if it was the next big thing. But from my experience, what I've seen is that a lot of people who work in that type of employment have been hit very, very hard, and it's given them an almighty new respect for the safety of working for somebody else in a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job. So not comms, we know it's not comms. But you know, the idea of jobs for life has gone. We will never have that again. But the idea of working for someone else in a job where they take a lot of the risks has suddenly become a lot less unattractive at the risk of using a double negative. I think what we're going to be seeing is the growth of entrepreneurship, people who want to getting out there and giving it a go for themselves, so that whatever happens, they can respond in the most nimble and agile ways they can. But also a lot of job sufficiency, where people upskill themselves to the point where they become a desirable commodity in themselves and they have the choice. They become the chooser rather than the employment choosing them. So I think that's going to give you a whole new interesting spin on what you're going to be doing with your stuff, Sinead, definitely.
But this is cyclical too, you know, I mean, and much as I'm sure there are certain things that will come out of this particular pandemic that we may not have experienced before, but we have been, this is my 3rd or 4th major downturn, and every time it happens, things do change, and we move from people wanting to work in very contract and casual to wanting permanent to then going back again, you know, and it just does these months, and that's okay, because that's a natural economy functioning. But what we need to make sure is that we are educating people to a level where they have that choice. Freedom of choice is the most important thing, right? So if we can create that environment and that economy, then this will be a very attractive place to be.
When we are talking, when you are, speaking with business in your role, Sinead, in terms of comms roles, where's the greatest demand coming from business at the moment?
Look, it's about to shift, I think, but right now it's definitely still stakeholder relations, still that engagement piece, and whether that's government relations or just corporate, a bit on the investor relations at the moment too. And I think we're about to see a bit of a spike in that M&A world, so that's going to be quite interesting to see what comes of that. But I think from certainly as these infrastructure projects start getting off the ground, then we're going to go back to that traditional cycle, which I love, of, you know, the bid phase through the design phase through the actual implementation and delivery phases. So and comms are critical at every stage of that. And it's different skills that you need and different types of engagement with different types of stakeholders. So I think the opportunities will be huge, but it's just the next few months of just getting us to that new layer.
And Sarah, what are you hearing from the clients that you're dealing with?
It's been a real mix, I would say. You know, definitely we were very government focused and government heavy during the pandemic, because I think most of corporate Australia was just trying to work out how to get people to work from home. But from a comms perspective, what we've actually seen from some of our clients is it's been really hard to get people back to work. We've even seen that in Kpmg. There's a real divide. There's those people that come in every day and love to be in the office, and then I think there's some cohorts of people that we will struggle to ever get back. So I think from a comms perspective, internal comms is going to be really critical, because it's getting more challenge, as I said at the start, to connect people, but also to connect them back to the centre or back to the office, because I think you lose a lot when it comes to culture.
Yeah, it does look like it's heading towards a hybrid model for the long term.
Yeah. We at Kpmg
instances.
have a home hub, an office hub and a client hub, and you can kind of pick and mix between one of those three. But I just think you lose so much when you're at home. Like I said at the start, there's just so much to be lost by not having people together and collaborating or connecting or whatever. So
I totally agree with that. But I'm going to fess up here and say I'm a die-hard working from home person. And that's just because it allows me to do so much more beyond work. I was talking to Sinead before we started here, and I was saying, you know, I calculate that I am saving 3 hours a day not commuting. And I use that time. My employer is now easily getting 2.5 hours of extra work a day from me, because I feel so grateful to be able to work from home that I'm doing it much more. I will take a 2-hour break in the middle of the day, which allows me to cook a lunch for my mum. She's 80, she lives with me. I can sit down and have a conversation with her over lunch, make sure her mental health's okay. These are the benefits of not being at work that I'm finding very difficult to overcome. Yeah, I work till 8 o'clock at night and then make sure she goes off to bed. But my boss is getting everything that they want from me. I'm getting everything I want to give to work, but I'm also giving in areas that I never used to be able to. Just don't put me on Microsoft Teams.
Corey, in your experiences, have you got anything to add on that front?
Well, just I think as work from home has been an interesting challenge for when we're talking about that, and I know it's becoming a bit more common practice, and I think it's a different mind shape for a lot of corporates as well to deal with that, and I think for those working back in the office, it's the ability you can bring in people on screens in meeting rooms, and we're doing that now, you know, as we do now. And you know, I even had a member of my team, you know, come and talk to me earlier this week, saying, you know, can she, you know, have every you know, second Tuesday as a work from home day? And I think you've got to be open for those conversations, and because that works for them and their own family life. And I think you've got to be not only accepting but supporting that as well. And how do you actually make that work in a corporate environment today? Because that should be seen as acceptable, and then you work with the technology and everything else that's available to you to make it happen.
Yeah, it's certainly a watching brief. It's really evolving over time, isn't it? Look, I'd like to move to just a final question for tonight, and I would like all of you just to answer it just for a minute each, if we could. But I'd really like you to think of a final piece of practical advice that you could give to any of our audience from your experiences around if they were going to focus on one particular attribute to really put them in the best stead for the time ahead. What would that be? And what might that look like? What could they do in very practical terms? I might kick off with Sinead.
And only one? Okay.
No, it doesn't have to be only one. No,
it's 1 minute.
No,
I'll just list them. Look, I've already referenced this, but I think it is something I'm completely passionate about. I think commercial curiosity is key. I think employers, they feel so grateful actually when they meet with candidates who've researched, who know what's happening in the market, who are interested in industry, who can speak beyond their own little sphere or bubble of interest. You know, I think people recognize that, and Sarah, to your point about networking, that's how networking works. Learning about other things, learning about other people and other sectors, that's what people want to know. And I think if you're going to be a really good comms professional, you have to be able to do that. So that for me is probably the most important. I'll leave the rest.
I think from a vested point of view, I would encourage people to learn more, to feed their love of lifelong learning, to get to learn as much as they can, whether that be about a particular comms skill or something about themselves, whether it's at a university or a TAFE or professional courses or whatever. Just push yourself to learn something new, and you'll be amazed where it takes you.
Fantastic.
I might suggest turning your thinking upside down a little bit, because in many ways it's not about you, or it's not about me. It's about the team you're working with. It's about your clients. It's about the customers. It's about the communities. It might be about the passengers in our particular instance. What is the gap? What is the problem, and how can you actually be bold enough to move the needle about to make it easier for them? How can you actually really, go that extra mile, take that extra step, and be bold to do so? Because we talk about that it's okay to fail. Well, this has been a period of time where it is okay to get out there and have a crack at something, and people will accept that and do so. And I'd really encourage anyone who is watching tonight that if you've got an idea that you want to put to a client or to your boss or to your leader, then go for it, because people will hear you out, and if it's got evidence and fact base, and then it may well be adopted.
You just reminded me of a mentor of mine, actually, who always says, just give it a go. Just dirty a page, just do a draft, let's have a go. And it really is, it's a great piece of advice, I think.
I remember the first ever client that I went to, and I was in the car heading out there with my boss at the time, and it was a pharmaceutical company. And I'm saying, gee, I know nothing about the pharmaceutical sector.
That's okay, you're a consultant, you'll make it up as you go.
Well, that's what they said to me, they know nothing about communication. And that was the whole point, is actually understand why you're actually there. You're actually there not to actually run the company or come up with the latest drug.
Right.
Yeah, fantastic. And Sarah?
Just to wrap up, I think I'd just probably prosecute a couple of points I've already made tonight. I think the networking point is spot on. It's absolutely critical. Information trading and sharing is a commodity, and it's valuable. It's probably taken me 10 years too long to work that out. And with greater focus, I probably would have a greater network, but I'm onto it now. And I think it's definitely something that's worth something to an organisation, and being able to bring that skill set to an organisation counts. And then I think too, if you can define what your purpose is, what gets you out of bed in the morning, and then be able to live that in some way, shape or form every day, work doesn't become a job, it becomes a way of life. And now that work and home life is so intertwined, that's certainly not a bad thing.
Wow, yes, some great insights there, I think. But although that's our last pre-prepared question, we have been receiving questions in from the audience throughout tonight's discussion so far. And I'd like to direct these now to our panellists. So these are live and unfiltered, so I hope you're ready. But no, they should be fine. The first one is from one of our members, Delka, who wrote in and has said, my experience of online connectivity has been that meetings are more focused, purposeful, and outcome focused this year. That has meant that chit chat doesn't happen as often. What have you done in a deliberate way to facilitate those critical aspects of the workplace? Let's start with you, Sarah.
I'm not one to answer a question about idle chit chat because I hate it. I would say that I would not echo that point that conversations online have become outcome focused at all. Our firm went through a bit of a deliberate process at the start of getting people together to have these awkward chit chat conversations, and they died really quickly. So I don't know whether it comes back to me being such a purpose-driven person, but I find a meeting without a purpose is just like death of a thousand cuts. So,
oh no, I think she said at the beginning that Dilka's found them more focused, more purposeful, and more outcome focused during this time.
Yeah, I would say that I haven't found it that way at all.
Wow,
so,
interesting.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. Want to know where you work so I can pick up some tips. Because our organisation's been very focused the other way about having those idle chit chats. And I
probably
really
agree because we became completely focused on information sharing, and it was really important for us. Like, we live in the world of data, and whether that's number of people out working or what we're working on with our clients or pipeline or whatever it happened to be. So we spent an awful lot of time talking about numbers, talking about facts and figures and what was going on. And we probably didn't spend enough time. And we had to create some of those opportunities for incidental chats. And I said it to someone, I think earlier tonight, I had to train myself to pick up the phone and call someone just to say hi, just to say, hey, how's it going? Because they were so used to me ringing them and going, I need information, what is it, what have you got? And which is fine, and everyone appreciates that because people are busy, but you do actually have to intentionally take some time and go, I'm just going to ring to have a conversation, so I don't lose sight of how your kids are doing, or what's happening at home, or what you're cooking, or whatever it is, because that is important. And
But
that's
did
part of
you
your
find that a
relationship.
bit forced? I think it just found I found it a little bit awkward. Whether it was, we allotted people in the organisation to ring
Yeah, no,
and
that's
check
weird.
in.
Yeah.
And so I thought we took
I'm
it
ringing my
probably
team.
a step too far. It was in our team, but it was also probably people you don't talk to that regularly anyway. So it's really different
No,
experience.
I've for the online stuff, what I've done is I've got this signal, and when the recording function is off, we can chat. We can talk about the kids, we can talk about the weather. My cat makes frequent appearances, as Alicia will testify. But when that record button hits, it's all work. It's all focused, it's all do the thing you need to do. And then at the end, the record button goes off and it's like, wow, let's debrief about that. Now let's have a bit of a think about this. But there are some people that I will also ring and have offline conversations with. Not everybody, because you're right, it then becomes forced, it becomes inauthentic, and it becomes, I think, counter-purposeful. So yes, I can see what Dilka's talking about, but I think it's not that difficult to make spaces, but not just for meaningless chit-chat. It is for something which has a value and a purpose of its own. It's almost a replacement for those water cooler conversations.
And I think, whether as I said, Zoom, Teams, whatever you want to call it, it's not the be-all and end-all, if that makes sense, because quite often, as we know, if you're in an office environment, you've been to a meeting and you'll have a conversation on the way to, quite often, you jump off the call and you'll be on the phone, double checking with that. And I think you make sure you do check in with different people, because different people want to communicate in different ways as well.
Yeah.
That's right. And is it that perhaps arguably they always did?
Yeah.
So, and that this has just made it more apparent perhaps to us. Anyway, great question, Dilka. Thank you. The next question we've got is from Cam, who said technology is still not accessible to everyone.
True.
How do you think we can overcome that challenge in our communities? So I might start with Anne on this.
I'm going to say, Cam, thank you for bringing my personal pain to the foreground here. I live in a very built up part of the world. I don't live in Brisbane Central, but it's certainly not at the back of Whoop Whoop anywhere. You can actually see the train line from where I live. I have the world's worst internet reception. It's been compounded by the fact that I've recently been swapped to, note the use of the passive voice there, to NBN, which is a whole world of pain I wasn't anticipating. So I have a great deal of empathy these days with people who live that way without access to reliable internet connections. Through my own lived experience, which I wasn't anticipating and haven't enjoyed. I don't know what we do about it, because certainly when I tried contacting my NBN provider, he explained to me very kindly and sweetly that the problem was it was a windy day and the wind was blowing around the signal, the wireless signal in my house, which is why I couldn't connect to the internet. There are no words really, are there? So if there was a quick and easy answer to that, I'm sure someone would have found it by now. I think possibly what we're talking about is the kind of thing we're having to do for our students, which is offer alternatives. It is resource intensive for an organisation to do that, and it's extremely demanding of the comms people who are involved, because personally what I found is if I'm trying to do a live class, if I do that and I'm also trying to do a Zoom session live at the same time, one of those experiences has to give. Neither of them are going to be completely right. If there was an easy answer, I'd have found it. There isn't, unless someone else here has got a really good idea.
Compound answer is government, like you were saying before, like greater investment, not just in the hard infrastructure, but I think the technology or the digital infrastructure is going to be critical.
But I think it's an interesting point, though, just to reflect back on schools for a minute. And when my kids went to homeschooling, and I could talk about that for hours, but won't. The different experiences some of my friends had from a schooling perspective, and then to hear there were so many children who didn't have easy access to laptops. So it's all very well for schools to go, yeah, we'll go online and we'll do Zoom, but these kids didn't have that. So I think there's more than just the internet piece, and there's the whole world that different people live in. So, and from a comms perspective, it's so important that the messaging is then, segmented in a way that means it's accessible to everybody, because even with digital connectivity, that's not a lived experience for everyone. So we have to make sure that we don't forget those people along the way.
And not everyone wants to learn online, as you were saying before. And, I still remember when I did my master's in business, which wasn't that long ago. Yes, they had a little bit of technology enabled, learning, but we got textbooks in the mail. I got a lot of my course material in the mail. All the hard copies had to be posted of our assignments and returned via post. So that was only about 5 years ago. So
that's the olden days.
Yeah, that is the olden days now.
So I'm putting that technology, and I'm certainly no technology guru. Not that my team can testify to that. But the point is that it shouldn't be the be all and end all. Okay, and never discount the opportunity to go and actually have a conversation with somebody. Never discount that. And even today's environment, I being able to go out and share a cup of coffee to somebody, or just even going out and visiting people in their own office or in their own area, I think is even more meaningful now to actually make that effort.
Definitely.
Yeah, great point. So Cam, hopefully that gives you a few tips on how to overcome those challenges with your communities. And the next question we've got is from Maddie. So while working from home offers an array of benefits, I wonder how the junior cohorts of organisations will feel if the senior people who they can learn from aren't as accessible.
So this is a stitch up because Maddie works in my team. So I'm going to not answer this question first.
Corey.
Oh, look, as I said, I think you actually had to be, I mentioned when we were answering a similar sort of question earlier on, that you actually had to be not only both professional but personal as well, and make that actually, you really actually had to make that effort to catch up. During that period of time when we were working from home, we had a time at 10 o'clock, didn't matter what you're doing, you had to phone in, didn't matter if you're getting yourself a cup of tea or sitting down, and it was a check-in sort of stuff with everybody. And yes, there was a bit of chit chat through it all, and with a little bit of work thrown in there. But that became just a regular thing every single day during the work week, that people set their clock by, because I knew, because as a mental health check for everyone, I just thought that was an important thing. And the hard thing for me is actually going back to work, because life's been still very, very busy. Is that you still got to stop and check in with your people as well. Sometimes you just can't set an hour every day and do that sort of style, but you still got to make that effort to actually make sure they're okay. What are they working on? Do they have purpose? Do they know what they're doing, and why is it important? And I think that's just even though from their respect the office and still working from home, you need to be able to connect with your people wherever they are.
And I think to the point about learning, right? And I think this is a critical issue for people who joined an organisation because they would have mentors, and they would have people who they could learn from through osmosis because they happen to be sitting beside them or near them or whatever, and then all of a sudden they're not because they're at home. There's a real need for organisations to completely reframe their learning and development strategies now, and make sure that there's a lot more structure around that kind of engagement, because people are not getting the same level of just hard learnt environment going, oh, that was something I didn't know. That's not happening in the same way. So we really have to make sure to help people continue to progress their careers, because you don't want 2020 to be a year where people didn't get to learn anything because they didn't get to hear things. So we've definitely brought in an awful lot more learning and a heap more, virtual engagement, like 12-week programs, so that our consultants could feel like we were continuing to invest in them, rather than just going, they'll be right, we'll figure it all out in January, because I don't see much changing. I think it's really important now to be thinking about that growth.
In terms of those, if there are more junior people in organisations, would you encourage them to speak up, to be asking for those things more in this?
100%, but they don't always feel comfortable.
No.
So I think it's a responsibility of an organisation to reflect on the different cohorts of employees that you have, and look out for them, because they may not be the ones who are ready to speak up. And if they're not, then they're definitely the ones that need the help the most.
I want to give poor Maddie a really big shout out because she actually started the week of COVID. So she was in the office for 2 days and then COVID hit and everyone was sent home. The next week we had 200 redundancies and nobody knew who it was. So poor Maddie had to endure a very uncertain couple of weeks when she first started Kpmg. But I just know for myself and looking back, you know, it was really easy to get sucked in the day-to-day tasks, forget that there were, you know, other people, if you couldn't see them all the time, that they were out there and they might need something. And I know I just found myself, even as a communicator, it's so much easier when you're in an office and can lean across and go, oh, just that thing on that page. Whereas when you can't see each other or you can't see the content, you've got to be a lot more descriptive. And I found that a challenge.
Absolutely.
So no charades.
Yeah, so I'm very visual.
No, that comes back to Corey's point before, doesn't it? It is about sometimes just pick up the phone or if you can, get face-to-face from time to time. And yeah, it certainly makes a big difference. Look, this is going to be the last question because we are almost out of time for tonight. And I am only actually going to read part of it because it is quite a long one. But it says, and it doesn't actually have a name, so I'm not sure who this one is from, but thank you very much. So corporate social responsibility that has been shown in many organisations during the COVID crisis. How can comms and change and engagement professionals embed that as BAU and see it continue into the future? I think that's a great question. Our question to end on tonight.
And it's really interesting because I did a session the other day about EVP and talking about what's changed in employee value propositions for organisations. And we landed on this because we were like, well, you know, flexible working is not an EVP anymore, right? Because everyone does it and that's just the new normal. So let's just leave that alone. Sorry for saying that. But
EVP, Sinead's employee value proposition.
Yeah. So, but now the most important thing for people is exactly this. It's all about this value. It's about purpose. It's about knowing that you work for an organisation that cares truly about its people and about its community. And how you demonstrate that and how you live those values in your general environment is going to be critical. And that's what's going to attract people. And that's what's going to keep people.
I think too, we'd already started to see a shift for some organisations to become more stakeholder centric as opposed to shareholder centric. That had been a bit of a model starting to emerge. And I think hopefully COVID has now cemented that. Organisations realise that they have to reach out to their stakeholders more often, communicate with them, understand them, be prepared to change based on what your stakeholders expect of you. And I think that's probably something, hopefully from COVID, that can be maintained and even improved across corporate Australia.
It does come back to that authenticity point we were speaking about a bit earlier, doesn't it? It's about really putting those values into action, that being very, very obvious. And Corey?
Oh, I think you got to try to live your values in every part of aspects of your life, even you know, in your personal life and then professional life as well. And I think that's you got to stand by them as well. And then from a corporate point of view, it's not only looking after your people and working that way, but also understanding the community that's around you as well. And I know Brisbane Airport Corporation's got a very strong record in that regard through our community giving fund and other types of initiative there, and being able to still reach out to the community that we're operating in at this particular time has been a really important part of our effort, and we made sure that we've continued to do so through this whole period.
I think what I'd suggest is perhaps with the whole CSR thing, it's time for organisations to realise that CSR maybe begins at home and that there's a real need for corporate social responsibility to the internal employees and stakeholders. This comment that I'm about to make does not relate to my employer. I made that very clear, but it is one that I'm familiar with. It's almost like when you get these offers of free mental health assistance and you think, okay, what are they going to do to me next? You know, what is it that they are offering me protection from? That organisation, I believe, claimed that here's a real good demonstration of how much we're caring for you and how much we're looking after you. But really, to say we will give you free mental health assessments because we're about to destroy you is not demonstrating CSR. It is very much this idea, I think, of looking inwards and saying to particularly your employees, we realise how much we depend on you. We realise how much you mean to the organisation itself. And the CSR that you would extend then to those employees is just as important as the outward-facing stuff that we're probably all focused on to a great extent. It's a good learning from COVID. But I think the idea of CSR beginning at home is one we could perhaps embrace.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. We think that corporate social responsibility today has just become, has really come to the forefront, I think, for most organisations. And so great question, which to give credit where credit's due, I've been reliably informed it was Mike. So thank you very much, Mike, for the question. It was a great one. But that's all we've got time for tonight. We've certainly covered a lot of ground. We've shared many practical takeaways from the skills you need to the industries to watch, and some insights too on what organisations are looking for most from communication professionals. And hopefully we'll be thriving throughout the recovery in 2021 and beyond. On behalf of IABC Queensland, we'd like to once again thank Robert Walters for sponsoring tonight's event, and we've shared some contact details in the chat so you can reach out to the team. And thank you to our panellists tonight. We've had some lively conversations, certainly, and we've really dug deeply into, I think, the human as well as the business side of the challenges and opportunities ahead. Thank you so much to Sinead Hourigan from Robert Walters, Corey Heathwood from Brisbane Airport Corporation, Dr. Anne Lane from QT, and Sarah Ramsey from Kpmg. Thank you also to our wonderful IABC Queensland community for joining us in the audience tonight. And we hope you've enjoyed the first instalment of our Candid Conversation series. So this is our last professional development event for the year. And on behalf of the board and I, we'll be working hard to deliver an exceptional calendar of events for 2021. If you'd like to find out more, and if you're not already, we'd love to welcome you as a member, so please get in touch with us via the details also supplied in the chat. And finally, thank you to Stefan Spalding from the IABC Queensland board for all of your expert coordination and hard work in leading tonight's event. Good night, everyone, and take care. See you next time.